The adopted kid built a $2 trillion empire from the passenger seat of a beat up Chevy Blazer. He typed out a business plan during a cross country drive in 1994, and 30 years later, his company makes $1.2 million every single minute. Albuquerque, 1964. In a modest hospital room, a baby was born who would one day make it possible for you to order 600 glow in the dark garden gnomes at 3 a.m. with a single click. His teenage mom, Jackie, was working as a secretary. His biological dad, a circus performer who vanished before little Jeff could even say dada. A few years later, a Cuban immigrant named Miguel Mike Bezos married Jackie, adopted Jeff, and gave him both a new last name and what would become the origin story of an empire. Even as a kid, Jeff was different. At his high school graduation, he gave a speech declaring his dream to build space hotels and amusement parks in orbit. Jeff, meanwhile, went to Princeton. There, he double majored in electrical engineering and computer science. After college, Jeff did what any overachieving, overqualified tech geek would do in the early 90s. He bounced around safe, well-paying jobs, Bankers Trust, a failed telecom startup, the usual suspects. But then came D.E. Shaw, a mysterious Wall Street hedge fund with a reputation for hiring brilliantly weird people. It was at D.E. Shaw that Jeff met Mackenzie Tuttle, smart, sharp, and apparently willing to marry a guy who thought spreadsheets were genuinely romantic. Bezos came across a report that stopped him dead in his tracks. The internet was growing at 2,300% per year, and Jeff had just discovered escape velocity. 20 different internet business ideas, online CDs, online clothing, online dog food, but one kept jumping out at him. Books. Why books? Simple. Millions of titles, compact storage, already standardized. Books were, as Jeff would later put it, the perfect gateway drug to e-commerce. So when he walked into his boss's office and said, "Hey, I'm quitting to sell books on the internet," his boss replied, "That sounds like a great idea for someone who doesn't already have a good job." Jeff did the only logical thing. He packed up his entire life, convinced Mackenzie to quit her job too, and started driving from New York to Seattle in their beat-up Chevy Blazer. And here's the beautiful part. While Mackenzie drove, Jeff sat in the passenger seat typing up the Amazon business plan on his laptop. Somewhere along Interstate 80 between endless cornfields and truck stops, the world's largest online retailer was being written in bullet points at 65 miles per hour. But it almost wasn't called Amazon. Jeff's first choice was Cadabra, as in abracadabra, until his lawyer misheard it as cadaver, not exactly ideal branding for selling cookbooks. Then he considered Relentless, which he liked so much he actually bought the domain. Fun fact, if you type relentless.com today, it still redirects to Amazon. Seriously, try it. But finally, he settled on Amazon. Why? It started with A, so it would show up early in alphabetized lists. Summer 1994. Bezos officially founded Amazon with $10,000 in seed money from his parents, money they later admitted came from their retirement fund. In July 1995, the website went live. The next day, someone ordered Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies, a dense technical book about artificial intelligence. Not exactly a bestseller, but it was a start. Then came more orders and more. His philosophy was brutally simple. Get big, fast. And he meant it. There was no time for polish, just pure urgency. Code was written by people running on no sleep. Orders were packed by employees still learning the software as they went. In 1997, Amazon went public. The company was still not profitable, and Wall Street analysts weren't convinced and ever would be. But Bezos had a different message for investors. Think long-term growth, not short-term profit. The investors who believed him would eventually be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. Bezos launched something that would define Amazon forever: customer reviews. Customers didn't just come to buy, they came to browse, research, and compare. That engagement created something more valuable than sales: loyalty. From there, Amazon expanded relentlessly. Books to CDs to DVDs to toys to electronics. By the end of the 90s, it wasn't just a bookstore anymore. It was becoming a digital everything store. Revenue was exploding, traffic was surging, Wall Street was falling in love. Amazon had become the poster child of the new economy. The stock crashed from over $100 to just $6. Headlines screamed Amazon.bomb. Analysts predicted bankruptcy within months. Inside Amazon, the mood was dark. Layoffs came in waves. Perks disappeared. Side projects got axed. Most of Amazon's peers, Pets.com, eToys, Cosmo, vanished into digital oblivion. By 2002, Bezos had a new obsession: build fast, scale harder, and never get caught off guard again. First target: logistics. Amazon broke ground on massive fulfillment centers across the country: Nevada, Kentucky, Ohio. Then came the kill shots. 2005, Amazon Prime. 2-day shipping, unlimited, no minimum order to customers. It felt like pure convenience to competitors. Prime wasn't a customer perk, it was a psychological trap. 2007, the Kindle. Amazon took aim at books again, but this time they weren't just changing where people bought them, they were changing what books actually were. The Kindle looked like a calculator that had married a notepad. By 2006, AWS quietly launched to the public. What had started as an internal necessity became one of Amazon's most powerful weapons. Soon, AWS was powering Netflix, NASA, the CIA, and ironically, even parts of Walmart's operations. While companies were fighting to survive Amazon's retail dominance, they were unknowingly paying rent to use Amazon's servers. Amazon was using their own internal data to clone successful businesses and crush the very people who had made them successful. Even Walmart, once considered untouchable, was forced to completely rebuild itself from the ground up just to compete. Inside Amazon, the corporate culture matched this ruthless efficiency. Meetings were lean, structured, and demanding. PowerPoint was banned. Bezos preferred 6-page written memos that required actual thought, logic, and data. Emotion didn't drive decisions, systems did. His most famous line, "Your margin is my opportunity," wasn't just a clever slogan, it was a threat. 2017, Whole Foods. Amazon's $13.7 billion acquisition wasn't just about selling organic groceries, it was about reimagining logistics entirely. Overnight, physical stores became distribution nodes. Traditional checkout lines were replaced by app-based scanning. By this point, Amazon had tentacles in everything: news with the Washington Post, entertainment with Twitch and Prime Video, healthcare with Amazon Care, smart homes with Alexa. Inside Amazon's warehouses, reports surfaced of grueling working conditions, impossible quotas, constant surveillance, workers collapsing from exhaustion. Employees started referring to their handheld scanners as the wristbands of Sauron. Yet somehow, the machine kept running. Meanwhile, regulators were circling. Lawmakers raised increasingly loud alarms about Amazon's dominance, accusing the company of crushing small sellers, manipulating search results, and weaponizing private seller data to destroy competition. Space. Blue Origin, the rocket company he'd been quietly funding for years, became his new focus. While other billionaires chased headlines with space tourism stunts, Bezos was thinking bigger: reusable launch systems, lunar landers, massive orbital habitats. He started calling Earth a beautiful place you can visit like it was a weekend vacation spot, while casually proposing, "We move all heavy industry off-planet to keep Earth pristine." Here's the thing about Jeff Bezos. Earth wasn't the endgame. Not for the kid who once dreamed of space hotels and orbital amusement parks in his high school graduation speech. Amazon wasn't his magnum opus. It was his launch pad. This isn't the end of his story. It's just where it gets really interesting.